Live every day as if it were the last, because before you know it, time goes past and life's just not that long. Tell all you love that you love them so, because even if you do, they might not know, and one day we'll all be gone. Taste the wind, don't let it blow on by. Sing songs of love.
It is hell to feel terribly torn in two directions. It was hell for me to feel terribly torn between two people I loved 41 years ago. It was one of the worst days of my whole life. It was after Christmas, 1981. I was 36, my mother was 74, and just the two of us that day in our Illinois farmhouse, where my mother had been born many years before and where I grew up. It was, the phone rang, and it was my beloved Don calling from New Mexico or Colorado. And when my mother heard it was Don, she looked upset. I felt terribly torn between my mother, who deeply loved me, needed me, and this young, gay, attractive man, Don. After the phone call, I went upstairs to my bedroom. I got the money my mother and Dad had given me for Christmas. I came down, I threw the money on the floor. I told my mother, "To hell with you and your money. I'm leaving." I went out the door. I walked up the road. I turned around. I walked back to the house. I stood outside. I saw and heard my mother inside crying desperately like an orphan in the universe. She was a very sick woman, had been for years. What if she had had a stroke or a heart attack and died that day because of my leaving? How would I have ever explained what happened to our family? Would they have ever forgiven me? Would I have forgiven myself? Eventually, I went inside, and she was so glad I had come back. She reached out her dear arms to hug me. But sadly, at that moment, I refused her hugs. One of many things I would aim to change if I had my life to live over, knowing what I know now. And that day was one of the worst days of my life. The memory haunts me, humbles me, and now, 41 years later, I would love to hug my mother 1,000,000 times if I could. I look back now, I see the heavy pressures on her. I see the heavy pressures on me that day. On my mother's side, I was her closest friend. She needed me. She deeply appreciated my help. I took her to many doctors, and she had suffered hell, trapped in a sick, fat body for many years. She had never met Don in person, but she greatly feared if Don or some other man became my lover, she would lose some of her closeness with me. After my brother married his wife many years before, he was no longer as close to our mother. She loved us both so deeply. She had invited her very special friend, Dee, and his family to visit us during the Christmas season, but for whatever reasons, they never came. I did many things for her she was not able to do for herself, and now she felt I was rejecting her, abandoning her, when I got very angry and walked up the road. On my side, I hate the cold and the snow of winters in Illinois. I was homesick for my life and friends in Albuquerque. She and I had had a huge argument months before about my human right to have a lover, a companion. My brother had his wife and children. No one in the world will ever love me more than my mother did. Probably no one will ever love me as much. I had been a preacher many years before that day. I had worked with many youth in Illinois, Arizona, Albuquerque. I'd hosted a radio program in Albuquerque in the 1970s. But that day, I tasted hell as I felt terribly torn between my mother and Don. She was my all-time closest friend, in spite of our conflicts and roof-raising arguments. 6 weeks or so later, as she lay in the hospital the day before she died, she told me, "I love you." And I told her, "I love you," in our last conversation. The next morning, her sister, my dad, and I were with Mother in intensive care as she gasped her last. Our lives have many very painful, precious lessons, memories. I want to be with my mother, my dad, Don, and all my many loved ones in a much better place beyond death. But I strongly doubt that happens. Wanting something does not make it so. Why bullshit myself when I do not know? Why are many men ashamed to strongly hug their teenage sons and their adult sons? Why are many men afraid to open their hearts deeply to even their closest men friends? Why do many men prefer to talk about sports, cars, neighbors, mostly shallow crap? Why are many men afraid to dance with a woman or with a man unless they're boozed up? Why are many men ashamed to admit to their close men friends they no longer have good hard-ons? Why are many men afraid to talk about dying and death? I dedicate this program to dear Jose, a very attractive bisexual man from Mexico that I met at the hot springs when he was 23 years old in 1991. I had sex with Jose 76 times many years ago. I kept track, more often with Jose than with any other man in my life. I was in love with Jose. Sadly, as a kid, long before I knew him, Jose was beaten by his father. And I dedicate this program to Jose and this poem, A Healing Pleasure. My poem, A Healing Pleasure. For the man whose dad beat his ass when he was a boy, to have his ass kissed, licked, fucked by me, a man who deeply loves him, is, I hope, a healing baptism of intense pleasure to the abused spot of pain and humiliation inflicted by an angry man many years before. Slow, man-given healing for a deep, ugly, man-made scar. Sadly, Jose was deported to Mexico years ago. Nutritionist Roger Williams in the 1950s proved that not enough nutrients can cause alcoholism. In experiments with rats, only 10% of those with full nutrition became alcoholic. And when nutrients were cut by 1/3, about 33% became alcoholic. But when nutrients were tripled for supernutrition, only 1% became alcoholic. In one study on people who boozed and smoked, an amazing 80%, 4 out of 5, stopped without even trying when they received super nutrition. Dr. John Douglas found that booze and cigarette addiction went away when those patients ate only raw foods. No willpower needed. Raw foods tell our body what is good and what is bad for our health. Dr. Joseph Beasley, a medical doctor, wrote this book, How to Defeat Alcoholism, Nutritional Guidelines for Getting Sober. I urge you to read it. If you're alcoholic or afraid that you're becoming alcoholic or have loved ones who are alcoholic, Dr. Joseph Beasley started a clinic for alcoholics in New York with the highest success rate in the United States. Years before, Dr. Joseph Beasley himself was severely alcoholic, almost killed himself. He had a brother who was a lawyer, died of damn booze, relatively young. The foundation of Dr. Joseph Beasley's recovery and his clinic's treatment program was good nutrition, healthy food. No one on earth is born evil. No matter how much evil they later commit. At birth, we all are like a bare garden plot at the beginning of spring. All of us who are in the child's life plant good seeds or poison weeds or a lot of both good seeds and poison weeds. We do not know what the baby suffered in the mother's womb before birth. If the mother was bruised and beaten when she was pregnant, if the mother was addicted to booze and other drugs, if the mother lived in constant fear or in severe depression, these all affect the baby in the womb. And this baby, as an adult man or woman, has no memory, of course, of life, good or bad, in mama's womb. We do not know what the baby suffered after birth, behind the home's closed doors, violent family fights, hunger and neglect, hate-filled cursing, seldom if ever rocked, hugged, and touched with affection. The Swiss Jewish psychiatrist Alice Miller, in her book, For Your Own Good, tells of the horrendous cruelty Adolf Hitler suffered as a child. Hitler was not born evil. Hitler was not born a mass killer of millions. Beneath the smile of the teenage good-looking boy or girl can be a hell of hurt, abuse, loneliness. Beneath the many jokes of the popular adult comedians can lie pits of sorrow, depression, suicide attempts. Beneath the gun-addicted hell-raiser's insane meanness lies an unhealed, abused child, starved for love. Men and women, if possible, avoid conceiving any baby if you know you are not ready, you are not able to be the good parent every child needs and deserves. No one is born evil, not Hitler, not Trump, not Putin, not the 18-year-old white man who murdered my grandparents. When a kid is severely abused, when a kid is starved for love, he or she often abuses others. If the kid has at least one close, caring adult friend, he or she may slowly heal from the horrific abuse suffered. In 2013, 15-year-old Nehemiah Griego murdered his mother, his father, 2 younger sisters, 1 younger brother. Nehemiah Griego was not born evil. I strongly compliment Regina Griego, Nehemiah's aunt, for her 2022 book, Sins of the System, Trauma, Guns, Tragedy, and the Betrayal of Our Children. And this book is in our Albuquerque library. Sins of the System, Trauma, Guns, Tragedy, and the Betrayal of Our Children by Regina Griego. Nehemiah's aunt Regina writes about the abuse Nehemiah's father, who was Regina's brother, suffered as a kid. Awful abuse that went back generations in the family. Regina says, hurt people. Of course, until or unless they heal. Regina says, traumatized people pass on the trauma. Hiding a family's poisoned secrets continues the tragic cycle of the abused becoming abuser. My family had serious problems, but if I had suffered as Nehemiah suffered, might I have murdered my family? If my dad had often beaten me at least once to unconsciousness with possible brain injury, as happened to Nehemiah from his dad. If our home had had guns, if my mother had told me, I wish we lived in biblical times so I could stone you to death, if I had been forbidden to have friends outside of church, if my dad had taught me to be tough and had glorified being a soldier, if my dad had made me patrol our high-walled compound several hours a day, if I had often suffered hunger with not enough to eat, might I have felt trapped in hell and exploded in deadly evil rage? Nehemiah's murder of his family was evil, of course. But no one on earth can say for sure that if they had suffered what Nehemiah suffered, they would not have committed the same atrocity. Nehemiah's main therapist at juvenile detention some years ago said Nehemiah was the best behaved resident in treatment there after his arrest. Nehemiah took responsibility for the murder of his family. And we all are more than the worst thing we ever did or almost did. When Nehemiah was 15, when he murdered 5 of his family, he read at third grade level. But after his arrest, while locked up, he completed high school, he took some college courses, and he read a lot. And get this, Nehemiah wanted to help other abused kids heal someday. With much help, we can turn from evil. We can change. Nehemiah is now in his mid-20s. He's now in prison in North Carolina, far away from New Mexico. He has been stabbed at least 8 times so far in prison. He is scared to death, but he's holding on. His Aunt Regina and other family had urged the Albuquerque judge to send Nehemiah to an adult treatment center near Houston. And his relatives, these that stand still beside him, were willing to pay for that adult treatment. But sadly, the Albuquerque judge refused and sent him to prison instead. I wrote to the judge, and I absolutely condemned her decision. It was evil. Nehemiah appreciates his aunt and some other relatives who have not given up on him. Nehemiah agrees with and compliments his Aunt Regina's book, Sins of the System, Trauma, Guns, Tragedy, and the Betrayal of Our Children. Our city library has that book. Check it out. A man named Christopher from the United States visited and wrote about a neighborhood in the southern city of Basra in Iraq. On January 25th, 1999, the neighborhood was hit by one or more U.S. missiles. 36 houses were destroyed, 7 people killed, many wounded. 7-year-old Hashim Ali, a cute little boy, small for his age, the large scar on the calf of his leg of his innocent body. The grim expression on his face did not fit well with his youthful features. His look pierced Christopher, the man from the United States, as he lifted his garment to show his wound. He handed the chunk of contorted metal that had torn his flesh. This U.S. export was stained with the blood of this child. His age, his innocence did not protect him from U.S. vengeance. His father, Hasham, and the crowd of hundreds heard Christopher say, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry." But his father replied, "You say you're sorry, but still your government kills civilians." A photo exhibit was there in that town on display. One was a 6-year-old girl, her hair tied back by a still visible bow. The girl is dead, her body partially covered with debris. Her name was Nan, and her little sisters, one 3.5 years old, another 2 years old, were killed in that attack that had wounded Hasham. A fourth photo shows their mother dressed in black, crying her eyes out, while another black-clad woman in mourning tries to comfort her. And these photos of dead children, victims of the United States government, their faces coated with the concrete dust, their limbs buried beneath the remnants of their home, which was built to protect them from the dangers of the world. These photos, along with the testimony of the people and the shrapnel that lacerated Hasham's leg, were damning pieces of evidence in one of a string of child massacres carried out by the United States. According to UNICEF, at least 5,000 children under the age of 5 died every month in Iraq as a result of the U.S. sanctions against Iraq. The sanctions and the bombings of Iraq were done in the name of people in this country, in the name of you and me. The sanctions and the bombings of Iraq destroyed Nan, her sisters, their neighborhood, delivered by U.S. soldiers, built by U.S. workers, paid for by U.S. taxpayers. The tribunal in Nuremberg after World War II declared complicity in the commission of a crime against peace, a war crime or a crime against humanity, is a crime under international law. So how can we honestly condemn genocide while participating in it? Why are we shocked when our children in this country settle scores with guns and bombs on the street, when the United States government does the same in many nations around the world? Sisters and brothers, let us stop the killing, our participation in the killing. I have paid no federal income tax, not one damn bloody penny, for 44 years. About a half of men who have diabetes cannot get a good heart on. And the other half of men who have diabetes will eventually not be able to get a good heart on. And if that were the only result of diabetes, why would any man who enjoys good sex with women, with men, or by himself alone risk getting diabetes? Diabetes also causes paralyzing strokes, amputated toes, feet, legs. Diabetes causes blindness, kidney disease with the hell of dialysis 3 times a week, 4 hours each time. And other causes of men not getting good hard-ons: depression, other illness, and over 200 pharmacy drugs can cause men not to get a good hard-on. Antidepressants, blood pressure medicines, chemotherapy drugs, pills to make you piss, sedatives, stomach acid inhibitors, ulcer medications, big fat bellies, cooked and fried high-fat foods, especially meat, and of course, damn cigarettes and booze. All of those can prevent men, especially as they get older, from having good hard-ons. But do not take testosterone replacement therapy. Never. Because testosterone replacement therapy can cause liver damage, sleep problems, skin problems, blood clots, acne, man boobs, enlarged breasts on men, smaller testicles, non-cancerous growth of prostate gland. Instead of testosterone replacement therapy, get lean, get rid of the big belly, eat only healthy foods. I know of a man who lost 130 pounds by eating only raw plant foods. And slowly get off all prescription drugs unless absolutely necessary. Walk and exercise every day. Sunbathe, get enough sleep. Take these herbs that I will list, herbs that I take every day: puncture vine, garlic. Garlic is the most important of all herbs. Green tea, hot red chili pepper, yerba mate, black pepper, ginger root in cold weather, maca root, ginkgo leaf, fenugreek seed, ashwagandha root, hawthorn berry, and bee pollen if you're not allergic to it. Pumpkin seeds, flaxseed, all of these can help for good hard-ons. And stop all unhealthy sugar and other shit. Stopping the bad stuff, the processed crap, is just as important or more so as taking the healthy herbs and foods. When I was in my teens and in my 20s and into my 30s, I sang many solos in churches. My mother was my number one fan. But I no longer believe many of the words of those songs I used to sing. I still like some of the tunes and the deep feelings of some of those religious songs. I could fake it. I could still sing those solos in churches. But I aim to speak the truth. So why would I sing words I no longer believe? Is singing words I do not believe any better than speaking words I do not believe? I love the deep feelings and beautiful melodies of many old country western songs and other oldies. But I reject many of the words about booze, revenge, lying, jealousy, violence, cheating. Hating myself for my wrong actions does not make me a better person. Damning myself when I seriously hurt someone does not make me a better person. We become better to others when we become a better friend and more forgiving to ourselves. Imagine how the most loving parent would be to a son or daughter who committed evil. I need to be that most loving parent to myself. Imagine how the most loving friend or the most loving coach would treat someone who did serious wrong. And we can learn to be that loving parent, that loving friend, that loving coach to ourselves. Not giving up on ourselves, not cursing ourselves as hopeless. We can become one of our own best friends. Damning ourselves often leads to shame, booze, and other drug addiction. Damning ourselves often makes us more mean to other people. If we want to deeply love and forgive other people, we need to start with loving and forgiving ourselves. Like a small child learning to walk, falling, but getting up and trying again. We need to face and confess what we did wrong, no question, but not tell ourselves we are no good. We all are more than the worst thing we ever did or almost did. How do you choose what you eat? Do you let the television or billboards addict you to unhealthy shit? Do you let your family and friends addict you to fake factory fast food crap? My number one test to eat some certain food is it healthy? Is it raw plant food from the earth? Will this food help me or harm me? My number two test, do I like the taste? Number three test, how much does it cost? Sadly, many people do not usually choose what they eat, making how healthy it is number one, the most important question. With every mouthful, read the labels of any processed food in packages or cans or boxes. Would you sign any legal document if you did not read and understand the fine print, the big words? No legal document is more important than our body's health. So learn what you're putting into your body and refuse it if it is shit. And if you're trying to stop addiction to foods that you know are no good for you, have none of that in your house. Get rid of it all. Throw it away. None in the cupboard, the refrigerator, anywhere to tempt you when you know better. Why do many men and women consider it manly for men to injure each other as boxers, MMA fighters, football players? Why do many mothers and fathers cheer as their son bruises and bloodies another man? Why do many mothers and fathers damn their son giving and receiving sexual pleasure with men? Why do some mothers and fathers throw out of their homes their son when they find out he is in love and makes love with men? Why is violence between men in the boxing ring or on the football field or in war far better accepted by millions of people than men giving and receiving sexual pleasure with men? Why prefer pain and violence between men than sex and romance between men? Is this the lunatic asylum of the universe? Most movies made in New Mexico, most movies made in Hollywood, most movies made in the United States are crap. Many glamorize murder, money addiction, greed, rape, robbery, rage, revenge, booze, or war. Many movies are shallow with the depth and clarity, the moral clarity of a mud puddle. Most movies made in New Mexico or Hollywood or the whole country are nothing to celebrate, regardless how many jobs, how many dollars. A stupid waste of time, of talent, of money. Oh yes, superb acting, well-designed sets, spectacular scenery. But what is the content? What is the message? What is it all about? It's like using gold platters to serve rotten garbage. Nothing uplifting, nothing inspiring, nothing life-changing. And I'm not talking about all movies. I'm saying most movies. Sadly, most actors will take the part if the pay is high enough, regardless how violent, how shallow the movie is. If we damn violence on our streets and in our homes, why watch movie violence for entertainment? Imagine if Breaking Bad had instead been Breaking Free, about meth users, meth dealers breaking free from meth. Would I plant poison plants in my food garden? So why plant poison in the garden of my mind? Why should actors be paid more money than farm workers, sweating in the hot sun, harvesting fruit and vegetables for us to eat? Do any elected officials have the conscience and the courage, the balls, to say all of this publicly? I would not watch most movies even if I were paid by the hour. Now, I compliment movies about forgiveness. I compliment movies about enemies becoming friends. I compliment movies about working for justice. I compliment movies about honoring nature, growing food, changing how we live to slow the climate crisis, about enjoying living simply. I compliment movies about natural health, naked body freedom, passionate romance between Maria and Pedro, or Maria and Juanita, or Pedro and Felipe. I treasure certain movies that move me deeply to tears. I want to cry, feeling love and sorrow to the core of my being. Movies that motivate me to live better, to love all people, to live more humbly, more simply, more compassionately. Those are the movies I strongly compliment. When I was a kid sitting at our kitchen table, eating with my mother and dad, I often slouched. My dad told me, "Sit up straight." And yes, my dad was right on that. Slouching is no good. Slouching can cause backache. Slouching scrunches our lungs, our stomach, liver, kidneys, heart together. Slouching can make the person feel and look less attractive, look tired and worn out and lazy. Healthy, confident, alive, outgoing, friendly people usually stand, sit, and walk straight and tall if they are physically able. When you see me slouch, if I'm sitting or standing or walking, please tell me to straighten up. Of course, as I pull my cart, walking many places, I often lean forward. Women wearing high heels on shoes and men wearing high heels on boots. Bad for the backs and the knees. If you walk barefoot in the dirt or sand, notice how your heels, not your toes, but your heels sink deeper than your toes. High heels on women's shoes, high heels on men's cowboy boots are hard on the spine, stress back muscles and knees. The heels of the feet are much higher than the toes in those shoes, those boots. Now, of course, if you're running, your toes make a deeper impact. But I'm talking about walking. Romantic relationships where the persons are many years apart in age sometimes work. African-American Baird Rustin was an openly gay man. Baird Rustin was the chief organizer for the 1963 March on Washington, D.C., when Prophet Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his I Have a Dream speech. A 25-year-old Quaker white gay man initiated. He took the lead in a romantic relationship with 63-year-old African-American activist Baird Rustin. 38 years difference in their ages. They stayed together 12 years until Baird died at age 75. And this was Baird's longest romantic relationship with any man. It can sometimes work, despite huge difference in ages. In their case, 38 years difference. Parents, make sure your kids know they can express anger and suffering to you, and you will still love them and be affectionate to them. If your child fears you will reject him or her if they express anger and suffering, their rage gets bottled up inside. And if that rage is never dealt with, that rage can cause that child, as an adult, to abuse others, as a parent, as a soldier, as a mean cop, as a violent street gang member, or as a Hitler or a Trump. We need to face and to feel deeply the truth about our parents, their good and their bad, their strengths and their weaknesses. We need to mourn their abuse as we forgive them, realizing they also were probably abused by their parents and never healed. Unless we die first, we all age. What we eat, how much we exercise, getting good sleep, sunshine, no cigarette smoking, no drinking booze, having close friends, forgiving and apologizing, all of those can slow aging and give us a healthy old age instead of a miserable existence waiting to die. 10 of the first 12 U.S. presidents bought, sold, and enslaved black human beings. Were we ever told that clearly in school? 10 of the first 12 U.S. presidents bought, sold, and enslaved black human beings. Crimes against humanity. And these 10 U.S. presidents and thousands of white men and women stole the labor and the lives of millions of black people, often treating them much worse than their pet dogs and cats. The white masters severely punished their enslaved black people if they tried to escape to freedom, or if they began learning to read. Whites lynched thousands of blacks for many years in 29 states. And sadly, most white preachers in the South did not have the conscience, did not have the courage to condemn slavery publicly. And sadly, no verse in the whole Bible says slavery is evil. No verse. When will priests and preachers and rabbis and imams tell their congregation that very sad and terrible truth? No verse in the whole Bible says slavery is evil. And they call it a holy book? A good book? Crazy. If we know the other person wants our touch, we need to touch each other's bodies, especially warm hugs. Millions of people starved for kind touch from birth. and do not realize what they're missing in their lives. It's much like being born with no eyesight, never fully knowing what we're missing. Kind touch connects us to other people. Sadly, many teachers are afraid to hug their students. Millions of older people suffer an epidemic of loneliness, seldom, if ever, touched affectionately by friends or family, in the nursing homes, in the hospitals, or living alone. I love to hug many men, many women of all ages, all colors, who enjoy our hugs. Kind touching heals our hearts. Kind touching helps us feel connected, to feel human. I love to hug. I love to dance to beautiful music. Millions of people are severely emotionally constipated. Many causes, often going back to early childhood. And many people use booze to unwind, but booze is a dangerous, unhealthy laxative for emotional constipation. Now, get that. Booze is a dangerous, unhealthy laxative for emotional constipation. Tears, and many warm hugs are natural, healthy laxatives for emotional constipation. I love movies with deep feelings that move me to cry. I thank Mark and Eddie for, again, as they have dozens of times, helping me with my program and doing such an excellent job. To your health, my fresh piss. Thanks for watching.
Tell all you love that you love them so, because even if you do, they might not know, and one day we'll all be gone. Taste the wind, don't let it blow on by. Sing songs of love, let the music get you high, and when it's said and done, you'll know the sun will shine on. And when it's said and done, you'll know the sun will shine.